Welcome to the Living the International Life podcast, where we discuss all topics from studying, working, and living abroad, and even language learning. And I'm your host, Jazz Cole, president and founder of Multilingual and Philanthropic Incorporated. Let's dive right in. All right, welcome everyone to the Living the International Life podcast. I'm your host, Jazz Cole, and for those of you who might not know, I am the president and founder of Multilingual and Philanthropic Incorporated. So if you don't know what that is, it is an organization that I started back in 2019, right after I finished college, and it was inspired by my own study abroad experience when I was in Paris, and I just basically fell in love with the fact that, I was the only student from my group at my school that could speak fluent French. And on the top of that, my experience was very different. And I just felt like I really want to share with people what this experience is like when it comes to just being just really educated on language and culture, especially because we live in a world where people love to travel. And traveling is, as Lisa Ling has mentioned, she said that, traveling, the best education she ever had was traveling. And so I'm kind of paraphrasing in that sense, but it is true. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now if I didn't have those travel experiences. And so when I came here, I think when I came back to Kentucky from LA, because I was still living there up until the pandemic, first hit back in 2020. And so, in that whole experience, I realized that, just to kind of give you, like I said, this episode, I'm just giving you a little bit more about me. So kind of going backwards, starting from my origins. I am from Lexington, Kentucky, born and raised. I moved to California to go to fashion school. And that was something that I was just determined to do. By the time I was, I think around like 8 or 9, I was like, I'm going to go to fashion school. I'm going to move to Paris. I'm going to be this big designer. And I was just, that was back when like the fashion industry was as glamorized as it was then, with runways and, like big name designers. And so that was basically what, I envisioned my life to be. But obviously that didn't turn out that way. I still, I did fulfill some of those dreams. I did go to fashion school. I didn't live, but I went to Paris to study, part of a program with my school. And that experience made me kind of switch gears, because after I got back from college, this kind of became more of like a blog that I just kind of wanted to start, because I wanted to encourage people to learn languages and to stick with it and to be fluent, and kind of encouraging them to kind of connect with other people outside of those who speak their native language. And so when I got back from, like when I went back to LA, because I had taken like a few months off to kind of just connect with my family, because I was always in LA and I was constantly working on my program. And when I moved back to LA, it kind of became like a back burner project, because I was so focused on work and I was so focused on all these different things that I wanted to do career-wise, just to make stable income. Because, like when you're in your early 20s, you're just like, what am I going to do? I need to find a job. I need to find a way to make money. And for me, I was also an entrepreneur because my parents are entrepreneurs. And I just felt like I've always been taught you need to create opportunities for yourself. You shouldn't try to just depend on a job. You shouldn't depend on, other people to kind of dictate your income, and for you to kind of be able to just be stable, And so, originally, I think, it started as a blog, and I eventually at some point was thinking about making it into a book, but then I realized that I need to have a platform to stand on for anyone to even want to get the book into the right hands, so it can be what I hope it'll be for other people. So I realized, why not start a movement? And I remember building a whole website on it, and, starting these like social media accounts. And actually the account that I had I had a separate account on Instagram where I was just showing all the work that I had made in school. And so I just kind of deleted all that and just made it into an account for my nonprofit because I already had followers and I had people that I knew. So it was just kind of like more or less them just kind of keeping up with what I was doing with this project. And it wasn't until the pandemic and losing my job and I realized that this project is really important. I mean, we have so many things that are that really involve foreign language. And I remember because even my last year at FITM, I had taken this general studies course in my bachelor's. It was called Issues in Contemporary Society. And we had to pick like some type of topic and write about it. And that was what we were doing for the whole quarter. And I remember taking, after having gone to Paris, I was like, you know what, I'm going to write a paper. I'm going to write my thesis or whatever on the lack of foreign language education. There's a deficit, and really exploring what makes this, why is this a deficit? What are we doing wrong? Why is it that usually about 20% of American adults only speak 2 languages? Why is that happening? And I remember doing I wrote a 40-page paper on it. And then I also had to do a presentation at the end of the quarter. And I remember enjoying this paper. And then I ended up finding it later on in some of my old Google Drive files. And I actually decided, you know what, I read through it and I was like, I need to really work on this. This is something that really is really close to my heart. So, and obviously, as many of you, if you've been following me on social media, as well as through YouTube or things like that, is you may know I speak 10 languages now. And I was bilingual when I went to college. And then when I left college, I was speaking maybe about 4, because I learned German and Spanish at the same time my last year. And then after college, I just started picking up more because I just had so many friends who were from everywhere else. And I had a roommate in my last apartment before I moved back to Kentucky. And she was from Italy. And I remember trying to spend so much time with her just to kind of learn about her culture. And I was like, finally, I have someone to speak this language with. And so I was kind of shy at first, but it's kind of like, the more I would talk to her, I would text her sometimes and she would correct me. And I had featured her on an interview on my YouTube channel. So, I had these friends and I just felt like, like I said, why isn't everyone else doing this? Why isn't everyone dedicating their adult life to language? Or at least language learning, and so that was something I realized that I really needed to, I really wanted to improve on. It's a movement. It's going to take a lot. It's taking a lot. And even with some of the students I teach privately now, just a lot of them are adults who are just like, I learned this language years ago when I was in high school, and now it's proving that I need to learn it again because I need it for a job. I need it because I want to move abroad. I need it for all these different reasons. I have a spouse, so all these different reasons. And so I think even now at the other end of my 20s, or entering the other end of my 20s, is that I'm starting to see that this is not just a back burner project. It's really important. So that's kind of like the origin story of how we got here. So like I said, from fashion to foreign language. And so that's pretty much it. I think in terms of those experiences after college, not after college, after COVID, or somewhere in the middle of that, I decided to move to Germany I moved to Germany to be an au pair. That was something I actually met someone who's now a friend of mine, and she was from Clermont-Ferrand, and I also featured her as well. She was from France, and so we connected through Bumble BFF because that's like the only way you can find people who are in your area, in your city, who speak that language. It's very difficult to just meet people randomly who speak the language you're looking for, and you just automatically become friends, or at least try to build a relationship. So, because she was an au pair in LA, and she was telling me about it, and then during the pandemic, I just felt trapped, and I just felt like I just needed to get out because my whole life was just up until that point in terms of, my adult life up until that point was just basically I was on my own, I was traveling, I was doing all these things. And so it's like all of a sudden I'm being trapped in my own home. And, I love my parents, but I just felt like, I'm back where I started. And I just kind of just felt like a failure for a while. And, I just felt like I needed to do something. So I ended up becoming an au pair, and you can listen to that podcast on Spotify as well. So that is my whole audio diaries of my experience, good and bad. So, but that kind of, especially if you go and listen to all those episodes, you'll kind of understand how that ended. And so I was with 2 different host families, and it was just a little bit difficult to adjust to. I also had a boyfriend at the time who was living in Bremen. So it was mostly long distance up until then. But so it was different. And one of the things I remember in Germany was having to explain to everyone every single time, because I was the only Black person in the room. And, having to explain my hair, because my hair was in braided extensions. And so I had to explain, they're like, how do you get your hair that way? And like, I've never seen that before. And then I remember this one Polish lady who was like I think she was a friend of my friend's neighbors. They were from Poland. I remember her putting her hand in my hair, and I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, what are you doing? And he had to translate to me from Polish to German and say, actually, she's fascinated by your hair. She really likes it. I'm like, well, why is she touching it? That's just something that I just never really, heard of like the people doing that. So that, for the most part, it was a big culture shock, just living with a family. Because I think it's different when you're studying, because you're still around people who speak English. You're still around, I was around people who are my age group. So when you're with a family dynamic, it can sometimes be a lot different. The other thing you have to really be aware of, especially as an au pair, is that you have to be aware of the fact that family dynamics come with, and it's self-explanatory, family dynamics, because you never know if people are having mental health issues. You never know if anyone's having marriage issues, anything like that that's going on. And so, you have to really be careful in that one. So that was just some kind of the things that I felt like I was dealing with. And so I remember having to call my mom regularly just so I can remember how to speak English, because I was so used to, like I'm telling you, it takes a lot out of you mentally to be surrounded by this foreign language all the time, especially because your brain is getting used to using it. Because when I speak English, I don't get exhausted. I'm not mentally exhausted because English is my native language. But when I was speaking German, because this is a language I have never spoken, natively. So I'm just trying to figure out what everyone's saying. I'm working, my brain is working harder, trying to figure out what everyone's saying, how to respond. Does what I say make sense? And it's like, it's an absolute challenge. So, and it's really rewarding. Like I said, it's very, very rewarding. And it's such a huge difference, especially like when I was learning Spanish, because I was learning Spanish and German at the same time. And I was learning Spanish because I was living in LA, and it was just unavoidable. And I decided, I'm going to learn this. Because I was very, very strong about, I just want to know English and French. That's all I need to know. So, and then later on, like when I was learning Spanish, I remember walking down the street because I was going to school. And I remember there's a woman and her child was in like a little stroller. And I remember hearing the child say, agua, agua. And the mom said, oh, quieres agua? Like, oh, you want water, and I was just like, that's kind of like a really rewarding feeling when words that, sound, these are sounds, like Spanish is not a native language for me either. So, when you're hearing things that's not your native language, and it used to be just like sounds, and like, because like I said, I never really had the intention of learning Spanish. So like, it just was just noise, like sound, well, not noise, but sounds were just incomprehensible. But then it's like when you start learning and you start having that transition where you're like, oh my gosh, what people are saying is actually I can understand, it's comprehensible. And that's like a huge shift for me, especially when it comes to just any language that I'm learning from the very first time. French is a lot easier now because I'm so used to using it. I watch French TV all the time because it's my favorite thing. I'll be honest with you. Like on TF1, literally, Maman est célèbre is my favorite show. Like it's a reality show about like influencer moms and all these things that they're doing, traveling, business opportunities, them hanging out with each other, how they're managing their lives with their kids and things like that. And it's really fun to watch. But the thing is a lot of things I've learned from watching these shows like this is that I have a lot of material to teach my students because I'm so used to like I'm picking up like things, phrases that they're saying. I'm looking at the context of how they're saying it, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I think that since they're saying it like this, it must mean it's an expression to express something like this. And so a lot of times I will teach my students these things because I'm exposing myself to native speakers, and I make sure that I'm teaching them authentic content based on how native speakers are communicating. And so on top of that, getting back to the Spanish part is just that it's just such a huge shift. Even like when I was, like I said, this is going to be last year when you guys are listening to this, but back in May, when I was going to a friend's wedding out in Mexico, we were in Playa del Carmen, and it was like basically we were at a resort. And I remember talking to this taxi driver because I had to figure out how to pay because my phone, actually I had lost my phone the very first day I got there. And I'm trying to communicate that, like, I think I was trying to figure out like how to access my money because I couldn't check my account because I usually do that. And I can't log in on anyone else's phone because it will say, oh, this is a new device. We don't recognize this device. We're going to send a code to your phone. And I'm like, no, that's not what I want. So there's that. And so I remember having to call my friend to help me because I could understand what he was saying to the other person because there was someone else who was trying to help me. And I remember them talking, and I'm like, you do, and I spoke back to them. They were speaking to me in English, but then they spoke to each other in Spanish. And I'm like, you do understand, you do know that I know what you're saying, right? And it's like being able to understand. That's a whole transition, because that was actually my second time in Mexico. So the first time I went to Mexico was actually for a Day of the Dead weekend. It was back in November 2019. I got there actually on Halloween night because that was a friend of ours' birthday. Because my friend, I met him because he was my roommate because he was on exchange from some, like some type of exchange program. So we were together for a whole quarter. And I remember, having Spanish in my own living space, for that 10 weeks. And his friend was also from the same, they went to the same school. And so they were both on exchange. And I remember them speaking Spanish all the time. And I remember learning all the like slang, or like I remember researching expressions just so I can like use them so they can think that I'm like learning Spanish. And, they're like, oh, wow, you're really picking this up. And, and he even gave me some resources like different YouTube channels to watch. I forget what the name was, but there was this guy who literally just goes grocery shopping around the world, and he just literally is just like, let's look at how much this costs. It's like, oh, like a kiwi for 1,000 yen because he was in Japan. And it's like, okay. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool. So it was easier for me to understand. And there was like one guy where it was like he was wearing like a mucha libre mask, and like there was this other girl. They were like driving around. It was like kind of like driving around, but like it was like they were chatting, and they're in their car. And that one I couldn't understand as well because there was a lot of slang I really didn't understand. So it was really, really advanced. But I remember after he went back, I told him, I said, I'm going to visit you for Day of the Dead weekend. And, a lot of people were like, oh, yeah, because actually, no, I was actually trying to do that because for Day of the Dead week, our student activities was having this movie night, and it was like, okay, we're gonna watch Coco. And I remember watching Coco, and I was like, I'm so inspired now. It was like, guys, we should take a trip to Mexico next year for Day of the Dead. And they're like, oh yeah, whatever. I actually went through with it. So that was one thing. The very next year, I literally booked my flight 7 months in advance. It was the first time I ever flew first class because I had booked so far in advance. Got there, I think my layover was in Monterrey, and then I got to Leon. And I tell you right now, literally that was the best experience I had. Like we went there, and it's like Leon is literally like my hometown in Lexington, except everyone just speaks Spanish. Everyone leaves their car door locked. Everyone treats you like your neighbor. My friend's mom was actually telling me, he says, "Yeah, Jazz, when you meet someone eye to eye, and you just happen to make eye contact, say hola. Like, don't do the LA thing where you're like, oh, let me look away. This is so awkward, you know." You know how some people will do, and they're like, oh my gosh, we made eye contact. And so it's like, you must say hola, like, which is basically what we do in Lexington, you know? And I had a culture shock when I moved back from LA, because I remember going on a walk down the street in my neighborhood, and I remember someone passed me and they said, hey, how you doing? And I was like, what the hell? I was like, what the heck? Why are you talking to me? And I forgot, again, I had to get reaccustomed to the fact that we say hello to people, you know, in my own hometown. You know, I grew up here, and I'm like trying to reacculturate myself. So that was kind of interesting. But overall, it was just kind of like I said, it was a great experience. And I was glad to be there. You know, I went to, his parents actually took me to Guanajuato, like the city. And I remember like seeing all these tapestries, because there's a university there, and there's like students who make these amazing like tapestries out of like sand and flowers and all these different things. And there was like a dog that's like running through them and like messing them up, but still, you know, it was like incredible artwork. You know, and just being able to just be there. And then I ended up taking a day trip. I ended up staying overnight at a hostel in San Miguel de Allende, which was about like maybe an hour to 2 hours away. And I actually had a really great time. And it was raining. Like I was walking out one day, and I literally was raining, like pouring rain. It looked like a river. Like the streets literally looked like a river. And, you know, I was like trying to figure out, I'm like, oh my gosh, my hair is ruined. That was the first thing I thought. And then I actually found a place that was not too far away. And they actually just gave me like a normal blowout. So I was so happy. I was so happy. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. You know, and the guy who did my hair was just so fantastic. He was hilarious. And we had a great time. So I made sure I tipped him really well. So, you know, these kind of experiences, and I'm going to be honest with you, my mom freaked out when I told her I was going to go to Mexico. I was like, I'm going to go to Mexico. I'm going to visit my friend. We're going to have a great time. And that's exactly what we did. We had a great time. You know, my mom's like, oh my gosh, I heard there's kidnappings and people doing this and cartels. I'm like, Mom, the worst place you could be in Mexico is anywhere near the border, like anywhere in the north. I'm going in the south, like the further south. And so, like I said, it's just, you know, when you think about it, it's a lot easier to navigate when you know the language, and having that knowledge, which really helped me. And because I also had my friend, I really was asking him a lot of questions about what should I do, what should I not do in Mexico, you know, what's the, you know, what kind of food should I eat, you know, what's good here, you know. I went to a bookstore, you know, and I had conversations with people, and I was really able to use that Spanish. And then when I come back, it's always the worst trying to get used to using your own native language. And I don't know what it is. I hate using English. I know this podcast is in English, but that's because I'm trying to appeal to a larger audience. But I'm going to be honest with you. I just don't like speaking it every single day. You know, like when the majority of the people you talk to is just English. And I really love, like, that's why I love my international friends. I love them very much because they kind of keep that language up to date for me. You know, so having those friends kind of helps me be able to just be like, oh, finally I can speak another language. And even if it's terrible, you know, at least I'll be able to speak it, and they can help me get better. You know, so because when I was in Paris studying, I remember going to Belgium to visit a friend, and we spent the whole day together up until I left. And he was telling me that by the end of the day, he said, yeah, I think your French has really improved as we've been talking throughout the day. And so I've been helping him with his English. We've been going back and forth, and, you know, it really helps me for the most part. This particular person we met on Hello Talk. And so we were basically just, you know, which is an app, if you don't know, you know, to help people kind of connect with people who speak the native language that you're trying to learn, and vice versa. So you kind of help each other out. And then we just ended up connecting and we just hung out. And then later on, he ended up visiting me in California, and I remember taking him to church. And I remember introducing him to my friends there, and he had a really good time. And then we ended up hanging out later on, and because one of my other friends wanted to hang out with him as well. So because he was from Cameroon, and he's like, oh, someone else who speaks French. He's like, oh, I'm trying to really get back into that. So they hung out. They were connecting while I was doing some homework. I felt so bad. I was like really trying to finish my homework assignment so I could hang out. And so I was just glad that my other friend came over, because that way I could be able to preoccupy, while I was preoccupied, he could hang out with him. So it wasn't just him just hanging out with me for doing nothing. So that really was, like I said, those are some really good things that really, those are some really good memories that I have. And so, like I said, with the friends, it's just, it's like, I feel like, when you make international friends, they kind of give you a reason to come back, because you have it's like a pinpoint, especially the last time I was in Paris, which was like back in 2018. I haven't been back since, and a lot has changed. I follow a lot of them on Instagram because we all exchange numbers and, WhatsApp numbers and whatnot. And so I remember one of the girls that I met, she got married, has a child. Everyone's just moving on in their life, going on with life and whatnot. And it's kind of like, I feel like I really need to get back there, because I really want to reconnect with them, and I know for a fact that French culture has been very close to my heart. As I said before, it's very close to my heart, and I have a long history with it, but I still feel like every piece of the languages that I speak, they all have aspects that bring out my personality. And there's some things I'm trying to work my way to the eastern part of the world. And be honest with you, it's very difficult because, well, not difficult, it's just intimidating, because when I look at Slavic languages, when I look at the Arabic language, Arabic dialects, and all the different languages that have symbols, it's very intimidating, because it's a completely different structure than what I'm used to, because all the languages I know are basically just Latin and Germanic based. So I'm trying to find the courage and the strength to at the very least attempt to learn these languages. I remember I attempted to learn Romanian because I was actually seeing a Romanian man at one point. And I will be honest with you, I was like, if I can just learn Romanian, then I will have learned every single Latin-based language, or every Romance language. Because it really is a Romance language. It's just weird because Romania is literally on the eastern part of Europe. So it's so disconnected from the other Latin-based languages. Because I know Moldova also speaks Romanian, but they use the Cyrillic alphabet, versus where Romania speaks Romanian, but will use the Phoenician alphabet. So I actually did a lot of research on this. So I attempted to learn it, and it's very different. It is a Latin-based language, but it's just different grammatical structure. If you can speak Italian, you can pretty much pick it up a little bit quicker. And I think after having learned 9 different languages, when you're learning a new language over and over and over, you eventually learn to have techniques and kind of a routine when it comes to learning new languages. So I hope you really enjoyed this episode. I wanted to kind of give more of an insight about myself, as your host. And I hope to have other people on this podcast as well. There are guests that are coming. And I really just wanted you guys, like I said, to get to know me and my background, because this whole podcast I started because I really wanted to share experiences and stories that are just, of course, like mine, but also as well as others as well. And I feel like it's important because I really want to inspire others who may have wanted to do things like this, because there's sometimes we want to do certain things. I really want to study abroad, or I want to live abroad, I want to find a job, or do something. I just want to get out of where I'm at, or whatnot. And sometimes, we don't know how to do that. So I really want to make sure that this podcast really gives you the tools, the resources, and like I said, the stories to be able to inspire you and to help you make those dreams a reality. Because like I said before, when you travel, when you learn these languages, it just becomes a complete shift. And so I really want to share that with you. So thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.